So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Native Prairie Association Fayette Prairie Chapter's Zoom presentation, where we all get to learn something new as land stewards. My name is Connie Shortis, and I create some of the programs that we do on Zoom, but tonight this program was put together by Marvelyn Granger, our NPAT Vice President. And Marvelyn and I will be running this call and introducing our speakers and helping everyone get their questions answered. So tonight we have a real treat. We're going to hear from 4 experts in various facets of estate planning. And this is specific to conservation-minded landowners. So we're going to hear from each of these speakers, and we're going to introduce them to you momentarily, and then further as we continue through this one as they each speak individually, and then they are going to take questions at the end. So it'll be somewhat of a panel discussion. So during the talks, if you would like to put your question in the chat, Marvelyn and I will queue it up for the end, or you're welcome to unmute and ask your question at the end directly to the panelists. So I'll kick it off with Jeremiah Leibowitz, who is going to talk to us about estate planning for the conservationists. And after that, Amber Arsenault, Jenny Claycomb, and Bethany Fauci will all be speaking to us and filling in more interesting information about estate planning in general, and specifically for conservation. But Jeremiah will kick us off, and he is going to be talking about things we need to include in our legacy planning. He's an attorney with 15 years of legal expertise on this. And I'll let Jeremiah tell you a little bit more about himself as he gets started with his presentation.
Thank you, Connie, and good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Jeremiah Leibowitz, and this is not my normal voice, but dealing with a little bit of a bug, so bear with me. But hopefully everyone can hear me. Make sure that I enunciate and speak clearly so that everything I'm going to share with you tonight comes through clearly. As Connie stated, I am an estate planning, probate, wills, trust, real estate attorney. Anything that involves land owning, agricultural lands in the realm of trying to help get those types of assets to next generation. And so, excuse me, as we kick this presentation in this panel off, you know, I've got on here a bison that actually happened to be the logo of my law firm. And I chose it specific. It's interesting that it dovetails nicely with the prairie and the plains and things that we're discussing tonight. But for me personally, it definitely reflects this notion and this idea of legacy, right? The bison is a very iconic species to our history all throughout in South America. And then in the middle of it there, you see the night sky, you see the mountains and what have you, that all kind of lend themselves to this idea that they're, you know, we're but a moment in time, but there are things that live longer than we do. And ideally, in what we're going to share with you tonight, these ideas of estate planning and what encompasses that subject can maybe get us a little closer to living as long or having as impact long as the bison. So with that, I'm going to jump into, let's see here. Okay, so in our agenda tonight, what I'd like to help share with you tonight, a quick overview and introduction to estate planning. I always advocate for an estate planning team. We'll talk about that, what succession planning entails, understanding some of the financial considerations that are wrapped up in this discussion. I'm going to spend, I got two slides, one specifically to deeds and titles, the other to wills and trusts, because to me, these are some very fundamental building blocks of an estate plan that are often misunderstood or misinterpreted, or a lot of assumptions are made about these items. And so I want to dive a little deeper into that. I'm going to briefly touch on probate. Not going to, I mean, I could spend a whole session talking about each of these things, but I'm just going to give you some takeaways, some high-level takeaways, and then in an effort to pass the baton to my colleagues that are also speaking tonight, I'm going to highlight a couple of other topics related to the estate planning process, specifically as it relates to land assets and how potentially you can integrate, excuse me, land stewardship or your wishes for your land assets into your overall estate plan. Okay, so introduction to estate planning. I recognize there are many of you on the call that are coming at this from different perspectives, either having an estate plan, executing an estate plan, having to execute a plan where there was no plan. And so, bear with me as I work through these various iterations. But at the end of the day, the objective is to develop a plan. Okay, that's really going to be the theme of what I share with you tonight. Why do we want to do that? Because if we do not put forth our own plan, it's in the state of Texas and elsewhere throughout the continental United States, right? We have intestacy laws, meaning there are laws on the books, schemes, if you will, formats that tell us how property and are going to pass to the next generation if we do not leave a set of instructions. In this case, the will is our set of instructions. Okay. Specifically, when we talk about landowners, we've got family legacies that are in play. I'm sure everybody on here has wonderful families and they all get along, but the plan helps continue that process, right? And to ensure that we maintain harmony or repair relationships if by chance there's some there's some friction or impasses amongst family members. Again, family is a key component to establishing these plans. I'm going to walk you through some little frameworks to get there, and really, as we develop the plan, as we talk about the team, which we're going to do next, it is all about, in my view, as I advise clients in the work that I do, it's about collaboration. And sometimes that term gets overused. However, it encompasses what we are trying to do. We have communication amongst a team of people, advisors and family members, etc., that are going to ultimately help us achieve our goals and objectives for the long term. So let's briefly talk about the team. My first conversation when folks come to me asking for assistance on establishing an estate plan, they're like, "I need will, I need to trust." And I'm like, okay, that's great. We got a few of those building blocks in place that we need to discuss. But we sit down and we peel the onion back a little bit further, and I start identifying that all of these other folks that they have worked with throughout their lives, or through their parents' lives, or through their grandparents' lives, at some point need to come and get on the same page, become part of what I call that estate planning team. I've identified kind of your three professional groups that are kind of the status, I'm gonna call them the status quo, but the main pillars. An attorney, very important that you have a legal representative to ensure that the tools that are being employed fit what you are trying to accomplish. Some folks have financial advisors. They've been working with financial planners for decades, or maybe you don't. Depending on what you need, we may need to get a financial advisor to the table. And that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a wealth advisor or an investment advisor. It could easily be just your CPA, okay? Which I've listed as their own category with respect to accountants, recognizing that some folks may have investment advisors, they may have other financial planners that are a component of their team. And then I've listed family, and I've done that on purpose because, again, as I shared with you earlier, in my view, the success to getting things to the next generation or creating a plan that includes them or doesn't include them, whatever the wishes are of the folks that are executing or are implementing the plan, family needs to be a part of that discussion if at all possible. Okay, so I want to stress that let's not exclude family if there's an opportunity to bring them to the table. Okay, I've laid out roles and responsibilities of what these various team members can do. And why do we do that? Do it because they've all got expertise in their respective fields, and they've either known you and your family for a while, or in many instances, you may be building new relationships. I've had many situations where Grandma and grandpa had a longtime accountant. Mom and dad kind of used that same accountant. Now the sons and daughters are in the picture. And guess what? That accountant's retiring. And so now we're having to establish a new trusted relationship with new advisors. And that's part of the planning process, right? Is can we rely on the historical relationships, or do we need to establish new relationships? Succession planning. Again, many of us have heard that term. And for me, the big takeaway here is simply the root word in succession planning is success. Okay. We're doing this exercise because we're trying to set up our legacy, our family members, our heirs, our grandkids, whoever the group of people are, we're trying to set them up for success. Okay. I've come across in many situations the folks that passing away, they're like, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. I'm just going to leave it to my kids to figure it out. Okay, that's everybody has a choice that they can make, but experience has shown me that that tends to create a lot of resentment for those that are left behind to be able to have to deal with what's left. Okay, and so to ensure that legacies are continued, succession planning is important, and the estate plan is a component of that. Okay, I've talked about and I've listed out here at the bottom some things that we're going to talk about here a little bit longer. The wills, trusts, deeds, operating agreements, powers of attorney, all tools. Not all of them may be applicable to you, but they are all tools that may be employed at some point in time. For many estates, depending on what's transpiring, financial considerations are at play. Okay, and again, the big takeaway here for I hope a lot of folks on the call that maybe have talked to family members or are worried about estate taxes and whatnot, we currently have on the books an estate tax exemption, a federal exemption, and Texas doesn't tax our estates at the state level. That exemption has been extended. It was set to expire at the end of this calendar year. The bottom line takeaway here is recognizing that there is an exemption value on estates. In other words, if you add up the value of everything that someone owns for an individual person in 2026, that exemption value, in other words, the amount of the estate that can be exempted from paying federal estate taxes, is $15 million for an individual person, or for a married couple, $30 million. So generally speaking, the majority of folks that I work with are well below that threshold. But if you are in a situation where you're starting to touch and reach those thresholds, then we need to start looking at some tax planning considerations as you develop your plan. Okay. And then funding for estate plans, we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into trusts, but recognizing that there could be tools that you already have identified that could be employed to help fund the expenses or beneficiary interests for your estate plan into the future. Okay, deeds and titles, very important. I cannot tell you, and I cannot stress the number of times I have worked with family members and clients where they have made assumptions that somebody has passed, that the property is going to go to mom, or the property is going to go to dad, or the property was conveyed into a trust, only to find out that because family members have continued living on a property or living in a home that has been a family property for generations, we find out that, guess what? The property is still deeded in grandpa's name from 2 generations back, right? Those types of things, when I talk about deeds and titles, it is extremely important that everyone understands what exactly is it that they own, and are the documents current? Are they currently in the names of the people that they need to be in order to affect the transfer, in order to be sold, in order to be borrowed against, whatever the circumstances are? If there is not legal title of record to the folks that need to have it, that in and of itself is a whole nother ball game that has to be corrected before we can move forward. So as you develop that estate plan, understanding how vehicle titles are titled, okay, how the houses are titled, how the land is titled. Is it in an LLC? Is it individually? Is it dad? Is it mom? Is it grandpa, grandma? Is it jointly? Again, all these things, an attorney is going to be able to help you understand and peel the onion back on understanding where exactly things are titled and who owns them. If they need to be cleaned up, that's a great exercise that can be done prior to needing to, prior to somebody passing, in order for that plan to get executed. Okay. really critical. Wills and trusts. Again, another component, huge component of the estate plan. As I described at the very beginning, wills, they are a set of instructions. Okay. It's better to have a will on hand than it is not to have a will on hand. Everybody says, I'll get to it. Eventually I'll do it. I'm telling you, the state has a plan, and it has to go into effect if you die without a will and you leave heirs. And that distribution of property at the end of the day through that intestacy scheme doesn't always align with the goals and objectives that the person that's passed, the decedent, may have. So please understand the will, get a will. This bulleted list of items are different questions and things and considerations about how to properly ensure that you have the right components in that document to ensure it accomplishes your wishes. Now, the trust. I get this question, 9 times out of 10. Jeremiah, I need to trust. I need to trust. And I said, okay, well, why? Who are the beneficiaries? What is the purpose of the trust that you want to set up? Trusts serve a purpose, but they are not the answer to everybody's question. They require management. They require administrative oversight to ensure that the assets that are put in a trust are available and distributed appropriately for the designated beneficiaries. Okay. Now, people say, I want to get it out of my estate. I want to get assets out of my estate. There's tax planning considerations and all that. That's all well and good. But we want to understand, are there other tools like a transfer on death deed? Okay. Or we want to do a ladybird deed, or do we want to gift assets prior to somebody's passing in such a way that we can effect the transfer of these assets and maybe not need a trust? Okay. But if we're looking maybe for the long term for grandkids and great grandkids and what have you, then perhaps a trust is the right vehicle. But I just want to share with everyone that don't assume you need one. Ask the questions of your advisors, explain to them what it is you are trying to accomplish. And your advisors are there to help back into and help you identify what the proper tools are to help you get to your finish line. Okay. Okay, so that brings me to probate. A lot of folks, I hear time and time again, Jeremiah, I don't want to do probate. I want to avoid probate. Probate is not a terrible process. And if you have a will, it's actually a relatively simple process. It's not an inexpensive process, depending on the complexity of the issues that have to be resolved. Okay. If somebody just leaves a will and does no other estate planning and just leaves everything in their estate bucket, which is going to be distributed by their will, then there may be a lot of legwork, a lot of administration that has to occur by the executor that is in order to distribute proper assets according to the wishes of an individual's will. Okay. But again, I encourage you, visit with your estate planning attorneys, all your advisors. If there are mechanisms where certain things can pass outside of a will, great. If they need to go through probate, please don't be scared by it. It's not a hard process. It is somewhat formulaic and there are some steps involved. But I think there's a fear of the unknown or maybe bad experiences as to why the general consensus is people want to avoid probate altogether. That's okay, and that can be done if your goals and objectives and your asset makeup is such that we can do that. But if for some reason you get a will done and the estate planning is going on, you haven't gotten everything finalized, and the person dies, it's not the end of all. Okay, you've got a will, and therefore we have a starting point that is that everybody can work from. Okay. Okay, so with that, I'm going to transition, and I've given you some very high level overview of the process, the tools, some considerations to think about as you're piecing together your estate plan. The context of our conversation tonight with respect to the conservation, the prairie conservationists, and ideally, what do we do with our land? I want to share with you some other consideration that could be a part of the estate planning discussion. And I'll tell you, I am remiss, having been preparing for this for a while, that I did not include in my list of advisors my colleagues who are going to be speaking with you tonight. Because not only should you, if land is a component, or giving of some part of your estate is a component of your estate plan, then your local land trust, right, or maybe a charity or a nonprofit that you're fond of, those also need to be included as part of your team. Okay, you want to be aware and understand and help you ensure that what you're trying to accomplish can be achieved. So conservation easements, that is a lot of what I do as well for landowners. I'm not going to go into great detail about that. I'm going to let my colleagues cover that work and what they accomplish in their respective organizations. You may also have an opportunity with no heirs, and you don't want to sell to the developer, but yet you want your land to remain intact and to remain whole. There are opportunities actually donating gift land to some of these nonprofit conservation organizations. You may want to give. Legacy giving could include land. It could also include financial giving. Maybe there's a way that you want to incorporate that into your plan. And then another aspect that a lot of folks are asking about, and I'm grateful that we've got some expertise tonight to share this idea of nature's burial, right? What do we do with ourselves at the end of the day when we're done? I think that historically we either get cremated or get buried in a cemetery. And now we've got options, landowners and people that have land or that don't have land even, but they want to try something different. We've got some information tonight to introduce you to nature's burial if that's not something that you're familiar with just yet. Okay. So in closing, and before I pass the baton over to Amber, these are my takeaways, and hopefully, there's opportunity at the end for question and answer. But at a minimum, have a will. Please have a will. Those are not complicated to get drafted, and you want to have that in place. Okay. Build a team, build a plan, deal those steps and help you build peace of mind. And there's a saying out there that goes, the older we get or the closer we get to the end of our life, right? We've accumulated more miles in our rear view mirror than we have as we look forward in our windshield. And my goal for you as you embark upon this estate planning journey is that you are able to enjoy the remaining, miles that you have ahead of you. And as this little picture shows you there at the end, enjoy those remaining sunsets that we all have. So thank you again for tonight. I'm going to go ahead and stop and hand the baton over to Amber Arsenault to continue on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. And just for all of you who want to know a little bit more about him, Jeremiah is an Aggie. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He's on the board of the Cibolo Nature Center for Conservation and the Heart of Texas Conservancy, and he's president of the Hill Country A&M Club. So you see how his expertise in law and his commitment to helping land stewards really comes together in all of his work. So thanks. And now I think Marvelyn is going to set up for Amber Arsenault's presentation.
Thank you. Amber Arsenault is our executive director with NPAT, and she works tirelessly, I can tell you, on helping our members and people across Texas who have land who want to help preserve it and make sure that it stays in prairies and good land stewardship practices. So she's going to visit with us tonight about conservation easements and land gifts and ways that we can protect our land and restoration for future generations and avoid having it just become plowed under by development. So I want to thank Amber for being here tonight with all of her busy schedule, saving Texas prairies, and share with us how we can help her do that. Amber?
Thanks, Marvelyn and Connie and the Fayette Chapter team. Like Marvelyn said, my name is Amber Arsenault. I'm the Executive Director of Native Prairies Association of Texas. I've been on the job for a year and a half now and still trying to keep up with our volunteers and members and chapters across the state. I'm going to cover a little bit tonight about NPAT, Native Prairies Association of Texas, to tell you a little bit more about our organization as I tie it into these tools for estate planning. So Native Prairies Association of Texas was founded in 1986. A group of people looking to protect prairies stepped up and put together our organization. We are dedicated to conserving native prairies and all those vital benefits that we value. We do that through land protection, through stewardship, and through community. We do have a team of 8 statewide staff. from Houston to Austin. I am myself in North Texas and Cleburne, Texas. So we are all across the state. We're a little bit different in the land trust world in that we have regional chapters. We have 5 active chapters. Our Blackland Prairie chapter, which is out of Dallas, our Fort Worth chapter, the Fayette Prairie chapter, who's hosting this event tonight, are kind of in the Fayette Prairie region. Our Houston chapter, and then as of just this past month, we have a new chapter in Northeast Texas. We do have 2 inactive chapters. We have lots of members in the Austin and San Antonio area, but currently they don't have, the officers and the organization systems put together. But if you are in that area, I encourage you to get tied in with them. We protect, I'm going to go through kind of the tools here, but we do protect 11 properties by owning them, owning fee simple properties. And then we have 21 properties that we protect by holding conservation easements on them. In total, a little bit over 6,600 acres protected across the state. Like I said, we do have chapters, and these are where our active chapters are located. So if you are in one of these regions, I encourage you to get involved. Connie and Marvelyn are 2 of our officers for the Fayette Prairie chapter there in yellow. And, they have all kinds of events going on, from service and volunteer events to social activities, workshops, boots on the ground events, prairie tours. So get tied in where you can. We also, it just happens that we have these chapters kind of in the same areas where our protected properties are located. And I'm going to pull this map up again a little bit later after I've talked about the tools of conservation easements and properties that we own. But you can see here the light green pins on the map are properties that we hold conservation easements on. And then the dark green pins are properties that we own outright and that we are responsible for managing and stewarding in perpetuity. So diving right in, I mentioned that we are a land trust. What is a land trust? A land trust is a nonprofit, sometimes a governmental agency, but tonight we're going to be talking about in the context of a 501c3 nonprofit that works to conserve land in the public interest. We do this as a nonprofit to benefit the public, and we do so through transactions, through land transactions. We typically have 2 types of land transactions. Fee simple, those are full ownership of the land, including all rights to use, manage, sell, or transfer the property. So if you are a landowner, I assume that you own that land in fee and you own it outright. We as a land trust also own properties. But the primary tool that we use at NPAT is a conservation easement, and that's a permanent legal agreement that allows the property to stay in the hands of the landowner while we as the land trust protect those conservation values, the ecological values, the scenic values, the historic values or cultural values. And we'll talk a little bit more about those tonight. I just wanted to give a really high introduction to more land trust. So like I said, Native Prairies Association of Texas is a land trust. Coastal Prairie Conservancy are partners on this call tonight. They are also a land trust. We are 2 of about 35 groups that work in Texas that are part of the Texas Land Trust Council. That's our umbrella organization here in Texas. The Land Trust Alliance is our national organization, and there's about 900 organizations across the country that are working from tiny little local land trusts that work in just one little county to regional groups to national and international land trust. Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy are some of those big ones. And here's a look at our statewide or our land trust operating in Texas. Like I said, NPAT and Coastal Prairie Conservancy are 2 of about 35 groups that are working in Texas. Some statewide, some regionally, some that just focus on certain habitats like prairie, or certain regions of habitat like Coastal Prairie Conservancy, some that focus in ag or river corridors and watersheds, that kind of thing. So we've mentioned a conservation easement. What is a conservation easement? I said this before, but it is a voluntary legal agreement that allows a land trust to limit certain types of uses on a property to protect the land's conservation values. we really like to do conservation this way because it allows us to work with more landowners. The landowners continue to own the land, and honestly, they're the best stewards of the land. They're there day in and day out. They're the ones who see the changes in the land and who can adapt quickly. We do have, like I said, 21 properties that NPAT protects across the state using this tool. They are perpetual. They last in perpetuity. They go with the deed of the land. So whether a landowner passes it down to heirs, whether they sell it or their heirs sell the property in the future, these restrictions stay with that property. The landowner does retain the ownership and they pay taxes, property taxes, although most of our properties that we protect are already in ag or wildlife valuation. And they can continue to have traditional uses on the land like hunting, ranching, grazing and haying, fishing, that kind of thing, recreational uses. Conservation easements can be donated where the landowner is giving up those rights without being paid. And in the case of a donated conservation easement, the IRS does see that as a charitable gift. And so there are tax benefits to donating a conservation easement. In some cases, there are purchased easements where there is federal funding, bond funds, other funds that we can actually pay a landowner for all or part of that value of the conservation easement. And so those are purchased easements. We're not going too deep into conservation easements today because we could spend our entire talk about this, but I did want to cover some of this. And then they are held and monitored by our organization, NPAT and Coastal Prairie Conservancy and these other groups. We have a permanent tie to that property and a responsibility to monitor and make sure that whatever restrictions have been put on that property are they are enforced in perpetuity. We do recommend that you start now, that this is something that is not really an estate plan, it's more of a now plan, and that's because our easements are customizable. It depends on the property, it depends on those conservation values of each individual property and the goals of the landowner. So we want to know today during your lifetime how you're using the property, how you want to see it used in the future, what your goals are, and how we can help you achieve those with a permanent tool like a conservation easement. And our best results come from working hand in hand with that landowner. So we do recommend reaching out to a land trust to have that conversation today. We are all a little bit different, and we do a lot of the same things, but we also, have our own flavors and do things a little bit differently. So we recommend reaching out and kind of getting to know CPC, NPAT, other groups to kind of see if they're the right fit for your goals and your property. Like I said, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on conservation easements today because we want you to do this during your lifetime. We have other opportunities to learn about conservation easements separate from estate planning. However, Coastal Prairie Conservancy is the lead partner of these two funding opportunities and partnerships, and Native Prairies Association of Texas is a partner in both of these initiatives. And so I don't want to miss the opportunity to say, if you do have a property that you are considering a conservation easement on, there is funding to help do a purchased easement in these counties, in these areas. There's also funding available for habitat restoration. So if you see your county in these two areas and you have some interest in either doing habitat restoration or conservation easements, check out prairiepartner.org, reach out to NPAT, reach out to Coastal Prairie Conservancy, and we would love to get connected with you and see if that's something that can align with your goals. There is an upcoming deadline for October 17th, which will be here before you know it. So reach out to us soon. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on fee simple gifts. What is a fee simple gift? It is when a landowner gives that full ownership of their property to a qualified land trust or conservation organization. There's other charitable organizations you could give land to as well. We take over all rights and responsibilities. It is different from the conservation easement in that we own the land now and we're responsible for the care and stewardship of that property. There's a few different ways that you can do a fee simple gift, a gift of land. There's an outright gift that's anytime. You can transfer ownership today if you wanted to one of our organizations. A retained life estate, that's where you continue to live on a property and use the property during your lifetime. And when you pass, that land would go to a land trust or another organization. And then a bequest. So that gift of the property through your will or estate plan, using that team to put that together that Jeremiah mentioned. So there's a few different ways here. Considerations and things to think about. So we are Native Prairies Association of Texas is a conservation organization. We focus on prairie habitat, and we would love to own property or protect property long-term that has prairie habitat and that has good conservation values. We would be happy to receive a gift of land, a 1/4-acre lot in Columbus, Texas, but we probably aren't going to keep that in perpetuity. We would love to have your high-rise condominium in downtown Houston, but again, we're probably not going to keep that property in perpetuity. So if there is non-conservation land that we are gifted, and it doesn't meet our conservation priorities, we want to know in advance, do we have the capacity and the right to sell that property and support our mission? We don't want to turn it away. We would love to have that and be able to make that legacy go towards more conservation work, but just understanding that any nonprofit, any land trust is going to have their priorities with what they keep as an asset. If you have conservation land, we recommend considering placing a conservation easement on it before gifting it to us. That way there's a little bit more flexibility. And we do have examples where some of our landowners have placed conservation easements on their properties. They've lived their life and they've given us a heads up, hey, after we pass, we're going to give this to you. We don't expect you to hang on to it. If you want to, it's protected. You're going to be a partner forever because you hold the conservation easement on it. But if you want to sell it, we expect and hope that you will use those proceeds to go towards the conservation work in a certain area or a different, a certain focus area. So just kind of having that conversation with us about, I have conservation land, or I have another asset that I would like to gift to you and for you to be able to use for your mission. And I think you'll see throughout all of our presentations today, it's all about having this conversation with a land trust or with a charitable organization so that we can answer all your questions and make sure your gift can be used the way you want it to be. We want to know about the long-term stewardship. If it is conservation lands, how do you want it to be managed? How can it be managed and maintained? We want to talk about if it needs restoration, if you want to provide public access. There's some people that want that they want to provide a park space, public access, and others that they would love to see it just protected and kind of more preserved than accessible. Consider supporting your gift. Another reason that we prefer to work with conservation easements versus fee simple ownership is that, as you all know as landowners, it takes a lot of work and care to maintain properties. We have this 8-person staff working statewide. So we do own an 1,100-acre property in West Texas. It is really hard for us to get out to it and do the ongoing maintenance and care of it. We only are able to do so because of our amazing volunteers and our chapters that we have that are very supportive. So by doing conservation easements, we're able to work with more people and stretch ourselves a little bit further than if we had, thousands of acres across the state. So considering supporting your gift with a monetary bequest, after your lifetime helps us have an endowment or a stewardship fund that can help go back into the care and restoration. If you do own prairie, then you know that it does not stay prairie by just leaving it alone. Prairie is very quickly transformed into, brushy, invasive woody species and everything. So it does require some kind of disturbance, ongoing care, and that doesn't come easily without the native fire and bison and others, things that we no longer have access to. And then just also considering the fact that we have the right of refusal as a nonprofit. If if we don't know about your gift and we are, you know, at the time of your death, we're presented with it and it doesn't align with our mission and our conservation priorities, if there isn't funds or support to keep it prairie, or that it might put our own portfolio at jeopardy, we do have the right to refuse that. So that's just another reason that we would love to have that conversation with you during your lifetime, to see if it fits our mission and capacity. And we do have examples. I have so many in my brain, I can't go into all of them, but where we were presented with a gift that it was like, if we could have had this conversation, we would have either, you know, told them, no, we can't take it, or asked if we could put a conservation easement on it and then sell it. There could be more of a conversation. So just considerations to have with fee simple gifts. A little bit more about the retained life estate. Giving a gift of land that the gift is during your lifetime, but you continue to live and use the property for the rest of your life. We receive that property now. We receive the deeded land now through this retained life estate. The donor receives income tax benefits, and it removes the property from their taxable estate. I am not a lawyer, so I'm not providing financial or legal advice, but there are benefits to all of these components. The donor continues to use the property to live there. They pay their taxes, insurance, they do the maintenance on the property, but we do have an understanding with them that upon their death and at the end of that life estate, it will come to this organization. So just going back to this map, and then I'll wrap up a little bit. You know, some of the best examples of these darker green dots that are properties we own are fee simple gifts of land that came to our organization where we had a little bit of a heads up. We had a conversation with the landowner or their estate planner, their attorney, and several of them, you know, that we are able to do the most work with and continue to restore or maintain in good condition are properties that came with an endowment of some kind. Any gift is important, and having a conversation during your life can kind of clear up, you know, some of the questions that we would have when being presented with these properties. So we as NPAT are so grateful for any gifts of any size, whether it's land, easements, bequest, and Jenny's going to talk more about those legacy gifts. But kind of to add on to the list of things that Jeremiah mentioned, we do want to have that conversation with you about your planned gift during your lifetime, because we want to thank you and celebrate your legacy while you're here and can enjoy it with us. We can do that anonymously. We can do that publicly, depending on your preference. But we would like to honor you and thank you during your lifetime. We also want to understand your wishes and ensure that whatever your goals are for your property, that we can ensure that those can happen. And then it helps us plan ahead for the long-term stewardship and care of a property. So reach out, even if you're, you know, nothing is final until it is final, until the end of your life. So you know, you can have a conversation with us without any ties or any guarantees or anything. So, and then we are a nonprofit. We would love for you to join us either as a member or for more
4645.
And so I'm going to pass it off to Jenny next with Coastal Prairie Conservancy.
Thank you, Amber. I did want to point out that while Amber mentioned that we've had the sheer joy of working with her for a year and a half at NPAT, she has extensive experience before that in land conservation and having these conversations with landowners and helping guide them through all of the options for caring for their land now and in the future. Her degree is in agricultural leadership and development. So you can see that this has been a passion for her for a long time. So I encourage you to reach out to Amber and share your goals and find out what she or her colleagues can help you with. Introducing Jenny Clycombe. She is with Coastal Prairie Conservancy. She's going to share with us sort of moving forward in this general conversation about land and how to protect it going forward. She'll talk more about legacy giving and other planned gifts that can help you fulfill your land goals for stewardship. So Jenny, if you would go ahead and introduce us to you and your topics.
Yeah, thanks, Marvelyn, so much. And thank you all for being here tonight, for taking some time out of the evening to have a conversation and learn about our organizations. So I'll begin by discussing Coastal Prairie Conservancy. So we were founded in 1992 as a conservation organization, formerly Katy Prairie Conservancy, if some of you might recognize us by that name as well. We did evolve in the organization, as happens obviously during lifetimes of an organization or a person, and expanded actually our scope and mission. And so that was a few years ago, we became the Coastal Prairie Conservancy. And as Amber shared, we're also an accredited land trust with the Land Trust Alliance. And, that's a very vigorous process. And I think just for you to know, any organization that is an accredited land trust is one that can be trusted right in this moment and then for decades to come. So certainly something that I think we're all proud of and happy to share publicly. So Coastal Prairie Conservancy protects close to 34,000 acres of land in a 9-county region, and I'll show you a map here in a second. And our goal over the next decade is to continue that effort and reach 50,000 acres of protected land. And so that's a combination of conservation easements as well as some fee-owned lands that Coastal Prairie Conservancy has out in the Katy area. That's where we have our programs, and Bethany Fauché, my colleague, is going to talk about Nature's Burial, which is where the Green Burial site is located on the Katy Prairie Preserve. So here's our map in our 9-county area. And so as Amber shared, certainly if you're thinking about a gift of land or are interested in setting up a conservation easement with the Coastal Prairie Conservancy, this is our priority area in this 9-county region. And as you can see on the map, there's some different colors in the chart. So land that is in green is land that Coastal Prairie Conservancy protects. And then there's obviously publicly preserved land, some other ways that benefit our environment. And we'll talk about, and Bethany will, up there on the Katy Prairie, where Nature's Burial is located. And so a little bit about me, because I do think this is important in building trust and getting to know one another. Probably the biggest takeaway you'll have tonight is that we really want to start a conversation with you, and that's a welcome invitation. So I actually started with Coastal Prairie Conservancy in the fall, and it's been just a wonderful opportunity to get to know so many of you and others who are just really passionate about the environment and obviously protecting our prairies here in Texas or in the greater Houston area. And so I'm responsible for leading the funding initiatives, communication, and making sure that we can continue our mission in the moment and then again in the future. So I have 12 years of experience in philanthropy and higher education, so have had lots of opportunities to talk with families or students, donors about really what impact they want to leave in the world, what goals they might have for their philanthropy or obviously going into education. And it really is a joy. And I thought just as a show of sort of trust and what it takes to get these kind of conversations going is my personal legacy statement, which I made some time ago as part of an exercise, but I think one that's worth revisiting there. So if you leave with anything tonight, maybe that would be a great place for you to start. So what is planned giving, also known as legacy giving, to make sure we're talking the same language here. So a planned or legacy gift is a donation made by a donor in the present, right? So it would be something that's outlined in a will or trust, but that would obviously be received. It's deferred. It would come upon your passing in the future. And so typically these donations, they can be quite simple, right? It would be a bequest or put into a will, maybe set up as in a trust, like Jeremiah said. We'll talk about this a little bit, but it can be as straightforward or maybe as complicated based on your assets or maybe the goals that you might have. And so some planned giving options. There's obviously parts of estate planning that would not be part of making a planned or legacy gift for a nonprofit. But those that we are able to receive, and this is not the extensive list, but these are the ones that I think are most commonly known or referred to, or certainly the ones that we would work with at Coastal Prairie Conservancy, at least to some extent. But bequests, right? Writing that in your will, establishing a nonprofit as a beneficiary of a life insurance policy, for instance, or maybe a basic retirement account. You could obviously set up a beneficiary that's a person, but you can also designate a nonprofit organization as the beneficiary. Establishing a charitable trust, there's charitable annuities. If you have a commercial annuity, you could create a beneficiary for that. So not to get too much in the weeds, as Amber said, I'm not here to give anyone financial advice, but just letting you know there are lots of options that you could consider. The land or retained life estates. Some nonprofits have endowments or would certainly welcome the conversation of discussing what establishing an endowment might look like if there is a gift of significance that could be provided. And then, securities, stocks or bonds or other material assets, maybe car or equipment, something that would align with the mission of the organization could be put into a planned or a legacy gifts. And so just know that we all vary a little bit. The basic structure is the same, but we do recommend reaching out. And I would say, especially if you are interested in designating your gift to a program or a certain initiative. And Amber talked about that, especially with if you were going to provide a piece of land that you wanted to be conserved. We need to think about if that would make sense for the conservation organization and what options we might have in the future to make sure that the gift is both living up to your legacy and what you envision, and also, provides the biggest impact to the nonprofit and to the land trust. And just for a couple of examples would be, if you're really passionate about native plants, we both have outreach programs, and maybe the name of an outreach program that we have related to seed collecting or, reintroduction efforts across the prairie might be named something different or 10 or 15 years. And if we're able to give you the right wording, that would give us the flexibility in the future, but also understanding what the real goal for you was to have. Sometimes we just have to make a guess, and we just love to know and be able to give you the kind of the vocabulary that we have internally that would make sure that we really know how to use your gift in the future. And of course, yes, this information is kept confidential and could remain anonymous if there are any donor recognition efforts that happen publicly. So yes, just we say start the conversation with us and really make sure, at least in a property perspective or land, that it aligns with conservation goals and any restrictions we might have. And those are things that are built in, and just so you're aware, might need donor or board approval to change. So it's not necessarily something that maybe even a staff member has the power to accept or not. It might be written into our bylaws. And so when could you consider outlining a planned gift? I mean, I think the answer is whenever you're ready, whenever you have your personal legacy statement kind of in mind and you know what your goals are, you talk with your family. Outlining a gift is just a great place to start. They're non-binding agreements, so it's not something that we would ever look to enforce as a nonprofit. Plans and circumstances obviously change. If you have alerted us or given us, a copy of documentation of the gift for our records, which we do certainly love to have, just so we make sure we're communicating with your heirs or whoever's the executive of your estate. Of course, we'd love to know about any changes that might happen throughout your life. And planned gifts can be simple or they can be more complex. It just depends on your goals and the assets. And I did want to mention a term called blended or tax smart giving that I saw the Native Prairies Association used on their website, which I thought was great. But this is something, just as setting up a conservation easement is something that we would really recommend doing in your lifetime. Perhaps you want to take some of the tax benefits that are available, especially through IRAs and the charitable rollovers that they make available in this day and age, at least in the current law. But blended giving gives you an opportunity to make an immediate impact and then also do a deferred gift. And I'd say, in addition to the tax benefits that might come with this, if you're really passionate about a certain program area or initiative, making a multi-year pledge or, setting up a donor advised fund and in your mind you're designating that for a very specific topic or to an organization, can just amplify the impact that you have now and then in the future. So just something, we both have this information on our websites. Talk to your financial advisors and think through, again, what your goals might be in this moment and then, with your legacy. And from the nonprofit perspective, beyond loving to have the conversation, we'd also love to steward you for your gift. It's collective impact, and it's just, I think people don't always realize that others are doing this or taking this step, and that provides us the opportunity to share. We have hundreds of people who've made a legacy or outlined a legacy gift to our organization. You're part of that movement. You're part of that impact. It's a really great story to share and provide a little hope in the world at this moment, and especially for conservation. And it's a great way for us to know, especially if you're interested in a certain program area, we can keep you updated as that evolves and changes as we move forward. So it just helps us communicate with you more clearly. And then upon your passing, if you share with us, right, who maybe your heirs are, who you might want us to keep updated in the years after your passing, certainly something we would strive to do if we do have that information. Let's skip a slide. Oh, no. Okay. So then here's our website. So you can go to both of our websites and they talk about our giving circles. So again, these are just that you could remain an anonymous member. Neither of our organizations currently publishes the names of our legacy or planned donors, but you can go here for more information at Coastal Prairie Conservancy. We do have an intention form. It's a non-binding document, but it just helps us understand a little bit about your gift. And it could be a good place for you to go and just visit to start thinking about, how would I fill this out? What are my next steps and what are my goals for a legacy gift in terms of their impact? And the benefits, in addition to anything tax related, which Jeremiah, I think, touched on a little bit, maybe there would be some benefits, maybe there wouldn't be, but I do think in addition, it might inspire others to follow your legacy and even let them know if you are building in this organization or this issue into your estate plans, it's something, if you would want that to be published or mentioned in some way, it shows people how much that issue cared to you, and it might inspire them to follow you in their own lifetime. So some recommended next steps, speak with your family and your loved ones about your goals and schedule a call with a financial advisor, with Jeremiah, estate planners, build your team. As he said, I love that word, build your team and start thinking about what those next steps should be. Obviously, I'd love to have a conversation if you're thinking about Coastal Prairie Conservancy. I'm sure Amber would do the same for Native Prairies Association of Texas. And then August is National Make-A-Will Month. So there's lots of free resources out there that you could review just to get your mind going again. And so with that, I think I'll leave us on this slide and I'll hand it over to Bethany to talk about nature's burial.
All right, thanks, Jenny.
Jenny. Yeah, go ahead, Bethany. I did want to say real quickly how much I appreciated, Jenny, how you tied together, you and Amber both did a great job on outlining how the future planning can impact the conservation goals currently, that we don't have to wait to have that impact. And I think that's good to understand. Okay, Bethany, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce your topic and how you can help people make these decisions.
All righty. Well, thanks, Marvelyn. Thanks again for having all of us together tonight. Hope everyone's still with us. So I'm the last speaker for the evening, and we're going to discuss our new initiative, which is Nature's Burial. Nature's Burial is the first certified conservation cemetery in Texas. And this aerial image on the screen, actually, I really love this image because it shows civilization right here at the top. And then where you see the two new constructed wetlands, that is Blazing Star Prairie, and the conservation cemetery, Blazing Star Sanctuary, is tucked right between those two wetlands, which I really I really love that place. So that's what we're going to talk about. Jenny already covered our mission. I start off our Nature's Burial presentations with context. I am on staff as the Stewardship and Outreach Director for Coastal Prairie Conservancy. And with our other team members like Elisa Donovan several years ago, several of us got excited about the idea of launching a conservation cemetery on the Katy Prairie because it's so mission aligned. And it provides a really meaningful service to our community, to our region, and allows people to connect with habitat restoration, with prairies, with outdoor recreation in a really meaningful way. And so we're so excited that it's actually up and running now. Nature's Burial is also aligned with all of our core values, how we achieve our mission through conservation, stewardship, outreach, and even research on our lands. More context, many of us on this call are already fans of prairies, but often our audiences have little appreciation for the significance of the habitats that we are protecting. So the coastal prairie once covered 9 million acres from southern Texas to Louisiana. Today, most estimates are that less than 1% of this habitat remains. And the Katy Prairie originally covered about 750,000 acres, all the way from the Brazos River to the edge of the 610 Loop. If you can imagine coastal prairie where the Galleria is, it's obviously a very changed landscape. So what we do really matters. Jenny showed you this map as well. The Coastal Prairie Conservancy, we work in an area of Texas that's rapidly changing. And so finding ways that can connect to people and allow them to get excited about land conservation is really important to us. We zoom in again, we see the Katy Prairie in context to Houston. And then we look at what are we doing on the Katy Prairie. So on the Katy Prairie, our first preserve was protected beginning in 1997. That was Nelson Farm. That was a few hundred acres that we started with. And I think Marianne's on the call, our CEO, who's been with us since 99. Today on the Katy Prairie, we protect over 13,000 acres, and across those lands, we have lots of work to do. So we are always managing, restoring, removing invasives, conducting prescribed burns in order to improve this habitat. We're also always looking for ways where we can get more people on the prairie and get them excited about this work and about also even creating their own public prairies where they live, or even pocket prairies in their yards. And this all ties to today. Why did we begin a conservation cemetery? A conservation cemetery is a win for nature, and it's a win for people. It fulfills a direct need for our community. We're the first green cemetery in our region of Texas, and we're the first true certified conservation cemetery in Texas. It also allows people to engage with conservation in a really powerful, personal, lasting way. It's also plot by plot direct restoration of the land. So it gives the people who connect with us at Nature's Burial a sense of ownership and a sense of belonging. At every single burial service, we spread native prairie hay. We scatter wildflower seeds. And in the future, we'll even be doing plantings at burial events. It's also program funding that fully aligns with our mission. As Amber mentioned, you cannot just ignore a prairie. Prairies require what we call disturbance. So we need to graze them. We need to prescribe burn them. We need to be the buffalo and remove brush. All that takes money. And so this is a really mission-aligned funding source for us so that we can keep stewarding the Katy Prairie. And of course, Blazing Star Sanctuary is so named because our goal for this space is for it to be a sanctuary for people, for wildlife, and for plants. So I love these aerials. Some of you may have seen these before. These show a success story, and this is actually Indian Grass Preserve, the public access point just north of Blazing Star. We purchased this property in 2002. Before that, it was actually an ag chemical testing site. And so in 2014, we began bringing it back to pre-colonial, what nature intended. So we brought the wetlands back, we put trails in, and then we actually planted that prairie in 2017. So that's an 8-year-old prairie. And right now we have a new welcome center about to open, new public amenities, a new bird blind, and we're utilizing all of these amenities to help take care of our families at Blazing Star as well. So here we are on the map of the Katy Prairie. So Blazing Star Sanctuary, the cemetery, is located right here where the star is, on the southern end of Greater Indian Grass Preserve. And it is 2 miles due south of Indian Grass Preserve that I just showed you. So they're in close proximity, but they allow a public access experience that's different to one another. So here's a illustrated map of Blazing Star Prairie, and then within Blazing Star Prairie is our natural burial area that has been platted as a cemetery, Blazing Star Sanctuary. The entire Blazing Star Prairie is a 68-acre public access section with those new beautiful wetlands. And then this year we'll actually be building trails with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Trails grant. Here's a great image of Indian Grass Preserve showing that restored prairie that we want people to see and get excited about. All right, so back to the topic at hand. What is green burial? I like to tell people green burial is just burial. It's a natural process. It's simple. It allows our bodies to return to the earth in a way that our ancestors did, without unnecessary artifice or preservation. It's just burial. The Green Burial Council is the nonprofit that certifies green burial cemeteries, funeral homes, and even products. And they define green burial as a way of, as a way of caring for the dead with minimal environmental impact that aids in the conservation of natural resources, reduction of carbon emissions, protection of worker health, and the restoration or preservation of habitat. So what is a conservation cemetery? Beyond green burial, which is a natural burial without chemicals and using a biodegradable casket like the one in the previous image, conservation burial goes a much larger step further beyond that. Conservation burial is natural burial that serves a higher, significant conservation purpose. It's the highest tier of green burial certification. It requires us to protect that burial land forever through a land trust or government agency using a conservation easement or similar tool. It also requires minimum protection of 20 acres or 5 acres if it's already contiguous to permanently protected natural land. It also requires low density burials. So each of our plots at Blazing Star is about 108 square feet. They're 13.5 by 8 feet. At a conventional cemetery, those are 4 by 8 feet. So these are much larger plots. That allows us to disturb the earth much less than you would see at a conventional cemetery. And we also have an ecological management plan at Blazing Star, just like we do for the rest of the Katy Prairie. As I mentioned, because we're pretty excited about this, the Green Burial Council certified us as a conservation cemetery. And so far, we're the only certified conservation cemetery in Texas. There are a few other green cemeteries in Texas, and several of them are great friends and even advisors to us, but we're proud to get this recognition. Here's a map from the Green Burial Council site that shows the conservation cemeteries across the US. As of now, there are 13 of us, and we're actually in a separate nonprofit called the Conservation Burial Alliance, and I'm on that board as well. I think this first image on the left is a great one. It shows how this all began. We really, started as people, as conservationists who were passionate about an idea, began sketching those ideas, meeting with architects, other cemetery managers, and just making this become reality. So over time, we moved from sketches, and this is from our plat, from our surveyor that's filed with Waller County. You can see all of the plots on that map, and then our beautiful illustrated map that we share today. So where are we in this process? Nature's Burial began about 5 years ago, again, as an idea with our staff and volunteers. We were dedicated as a cemetery last September. We began our restoration work last summer. We've done 2 cover crops on the land. This is part of our prairie restoration that we're doing at Blazing Star. And then we'll actually be planting the prairie, should be this October. And we're planning to make that a public event. We want people to be out there celebrating and helping out. We started selling plots just this past January, so it's only been half a year. We had our first cremains interment also in January, and then we had our very first natural burial. Well, that I misspelled. We had our very first natural burial in April. And then right now, as I mentioned, we're also launching our public amenities. So we're planning for shade structures, more tree plantings, and the trail design, thanks to Texas Parks and Wildlife. So that's all I have for today. I wanted to make sure we left time for questions from all of you, since I know we've covered a lot of ground tonight. And there's my contact information. We also hope all of you will join us on our social media. We have an Instagram account for Coastal Prairie Conservancy and for Nature's Burial. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. You'll be interested to know that Bethany, in addition to having a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife and Fishery Sciences and a Master of Science in Recreation, Park, and Tourism Sciences from Texas A&M, she is also a licensed funeral director. So thank you so much for that really interesting information. News to me. So our panel of experts, we've gotten a lot of information coming from different aspects of estate planning and end-of-life options for us as landowners and conservationists. But now we're open for questions. Our panel is ready to inform us. So you're welcome to put your questions in chat. Marvelyn and I will keep an eye on that and queue them up for our speakers, or you can simply unmute and ask your question directly to the panel or to an individual on the panel.
Well, Connie, I'll be happy to kick it off. I see one in the chat already. If it's okay, I'll go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, so thank you, Marianne, for that question. And for if folks are not following along in the chat, Marianne's question says, could I discuss how the death deed works, and is this something that goes in one's will? Fantastic question. And the short answer is no, it does not go in your will. Okay. A transfer on death deed, for the benefit of the group, is simply you are deeding. It could be a vehicle. There's actually a DMV form that you can fill out for a transfer of vehicle title upon your death to a beneficiary, or you could deed a piece of property to a beneficiary. The short version is those respected documents get filed in the respective county records or the DMV records, and upon the passing of an individual, you present the death certificate, and that deed is already filed of record, and it shows that there's already been a deed, right? It's already transferred. So it's passing outside of the will. It's passing outside of somebody's estate. And that is not something that would get probated through the probate process. And another important note to know about the transfer on death deed, it's a revocable document. Okay, so let's say I do a transfer on death deed to Marianne, And for some reason, in 15 years, we have falling out. And I tell myself, you know what, Jeremiah, I'm going to rescind that transfer on death deed, and Mary Ann's not going to get anything. Well, if I don't go and file the rescission, okay, and I die, guess what? Mary Ann gets the land, right? Okay, so anytime you take these steps and you do a transfer on death deed or any sort of thing that is going to cause something to go into effect upon your passing, while you're alive, you have the option to rescind. But you got to remember that you still have that option, or that you did that, right? You've done 20 years ago. And so it can be an effective tool. By all means, it can be a tool in the toolbox if it fits your situation. So Marianne, I hope that answered what you're asking.
It does, thank you. And so you could do that to an entity as well as to an individual?
Yes, you can, Marianne. That's correct. And basically, at the end of the day, whoever's the grantee in that transfer on death deed is the beneficiary of the gift. So
Right.
it could be to it could be to the Coastal Prairie Conservancy. Absolutely, absolutely. There's no limitation as to who that can be conveyed to.
Yeah, and if it's one last question, if it's not in the will though, how do maybe your other heirs find out about that? Or should it be a surprise, or do
Yeah,
you,
no,
do you
that's
just tell them?
yeah, I think, ultimately you want to tell them if there's an opportunity to convey that to them, or, unless somebody is thinking that they're going to get it. Because the will acts as a catch-all. So let's say you thought about, yeah, and you know that you got it notarized, you have that transfer on death deed sitting on your desk, and you never file it of record, then it doesn't exist, right? So that land would then pass according to the terms of your will, and you may have intended it to go to Coastal Prairie, when in fact it's going to get divided 3 ways amongst your kids, right?
Yeah.
So it's just important to follow up and just make sure that if that's the tool you want to use, implement it or rescind it, just monitor it, right? All these things require administration. But in terms of somebody being notified as to whether or not that's happening, I've seen it multiple ways, Marianne. People communicate about it and people don't. And then the chips fall where they may.
Thank you.
Terrific, thanks. And I'm so glad somebody asked this question because I have the same one. And I guess this is Margaret Simon. I think I've got that name. What is a ladybird deed? I guess that's for Jeremiah. Did it show up in your presentation, Jeremiah?
I think I might have briefly mentioned it, and it goes along the lines that was discussed briefly about potentially maintaining life estates on a piece of property, right? So a ladybird deed, in essence, is that transfer, that underlying fee simple transfer of the ownership of the land, but you're retaining a life estate. Okay. That transfer on debt, the ladybird deed goes into effect time now. I'm deeding the land, somebody else owns it, but I still have the right to do a lot of stuff. And I think that's where people get confused, is it's more than just a life estate. I could sell the land under a ladybird deed, right? I mean, and there's nothing to the beneficiary, as long as I'm alive and I still have the interest of that land, though I've deeded it. Um, you got that versus a transfer on death deed, where that's not going to go into effect until you die. And I have this mixed up, and forgive me, my head is really cloudy right now. But the ladybird deed and the transfer on death deed, depending on what you're trying to do, can accomplish a transfer or retain, with the ladybird deed allowing you to retain a life estate.
And I think this question might be one that Amber could respond to. A question about conservation easements. Is there a limit to its size? Joyce Gigout asks. And are there any tax benefits to donating an easement prior to death?
That's a great question, Joyce. So let's start one at a time. The question about size we get a lot, and we as land trusts never want to say that a property, no matter the size, is not worth protecting. It is, but it does take inputs to put a conservation easement on a property. So sometimes, and a lot of times, it's the same cost to put a conservation easement on 100 acres as it is to put a conservation easement on 1,000 acres. So sometimes it's not cost effective for either the landowner or the conservation organization, which is a reason to have a conversation and ask that on a specific case-by-case basis. So there's no limit in size. However, we have our own conservation priorities, and so we may not be able to spend the time and resources on a property that doesn't fit into our own priorities. 25 acres in West Texas that doesn't have a lot of development pressure may not take priority. However, 25 acres right next to one of our protected properties, or right next to Indian Grass Prairie for CPC, is going to be very important because of that connectedness to other protected properties. So there's not a size limit, and I hate to say it, no one wants to hear it depends, but it depends on the property itself, on the conservation values, and on the land trust that you're working with. So definitely talk to us on an individual basis about the particulars of your property. Other groups that I've worked for focused on watersheds. And so, if it was outside of the Brazos River watershed, they may not want to look at something smaller than 100 acres. But if it's right on the Brazos River and it's 25 acres, again, there's more of a priority there. So it depends. And I'm sorry not to give you a better answer to your question. As far as the tax benefits to donating an easement prior to death, so when you donate a conservation easement, there is a change in the value of the property. An appraiser, a special appraiser, goes out and looks at it ahead of time and says, today on this 100 acres that Marvelyn and Trey Granger are putting a conservation easement on, today on that 100 acres, they can have a Walmart, 100 home sites, a Super Target, Starbucks, etc. It's worth X amount of dollars. But tomorrow, after it's encumbered by this conservation easement, they can't have the Walmart, the 100 homes, the Super Target, the Starbucks, etc. They can only have one other home site, and it can never be subdivided. So that change in value of the highest and best interest for the property, that change is the conservation easement value. It's what that landowner is giving up in the interest of the public. We all benefit from them protecting that to be wildlife habitat and open space, etc. So the value of your property is diminished. I still think it's very easy to sell because there's people that are looking for intact properties. There's going to be less and less of these larger acreages, but there is a change in value there. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremiah, but your heirs can benefit from that change in value when they're inheriting your property with a conservation easement on it. They're not inheriting the highest and best value for the Walmart, Super Target, 100 homes or whatever. So there could be a little bit of a value there. But what you're giving up at the time that you do a conservation easement is honored. That donation is honored by the IRS, and there could be tax benefits for you. I hope I answered that. What is the percent change in value normally? Cindy just asked that question as a follow-up real quickly. I typically see a 30 to 40% change in value of land, going from full fair market value to having a conservation easement encumbered on the property. And that may change depending on where the conservation easement is. Is it right outside of Houston? Is it in the more of a rural area that doesn't have the development pressures yet? That probably depends a lot on it as well.
Jeremiah, did you want to weigh in on that?
Agree with the general comment that depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you can benefit from a from an appraisal that does reduce the value of that appraised property if that fits the math that needs to occur in the valuation of somebody's estate. And then the flip side to that, interestingly, is without going into too much detail, there's also the benefit of the heirs that are receiving that land in terms of their valuation of their starting point. They can either take a step up in basis, on one hand, they can use it to reduce the estate value. On the other hand, if they then inherit the land, they can potentially take ownership of that land at a value that it's a fair market value as of the time that they inherit the gift. So again, depending on what the strategies are and what their financial criteria is, both of those things could be at play.
Jane, did you have a question? It doesn't seem to have come through on the chat. So if you do have a question, unmute and ask it. Okay. Well, I have a quick question, maybe for Bethany. So this may be a dumb question, but can you be buried like not in a container? Can you just put your body in the ground?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't get into the nitty gritty too much, but yes, you can be buried in anything that's fully biodegradable, including like your quilt, a cotton sheet, linen, or a really beautiful pine box or woven wicker casket. There's actually many options now for green burial, including something free that you already have in your house.
Terrific, thanks.
Mhm.
And lots of great resources being posted in the chat, so be sure and grab those. And for your own records, as Marvelyn pointed out, we have recorded this, and this whole session will be posted on the Fayette Prairie Chapter's website. So it's under events, I think, and you'll find this. It will be posted shortly. So you can go back. There's just lots of good information and details here. And of course, everyone's contact information. I know everyone would be really happy to hear from you and really happy to answer questions. And we just want to thank everybody so much that was on our panel and contributed their time tonight.
Real quick, I think we got Jane's question in the chat.
Jane, yes, thank you. Do your organizations provide the majority of the legal work, drafting agreements, etc., to help the donors complete a legacy gift? Perhaps Amber or Jenny can speak to that.
Yeah, we do not provide financial advice. We can point you to resources that can provide, sample or template language, for instance, in what could be included in a will, maybe some resources on how one would go about setting up a trust. Obviously, Jeremiah is a trusted member of the environmental community and sector. And so, we can provide those resources, but we cannot provide the legal counsel or guidance. I mean, and that's from a standpoint of we recognize obviously our role and obviously the partnership conversation, and then also our expertise. And so it's maybe a little bit of a blended conversation there, but yes, we'll certainly welcome having the conversation with you and talking about the different vehicles and how that might benefit Coastal Prairie Conservancy. But we won't be able to endorse or necessarily recommend something for your estate planning needs or certainly, how that fits within your goals. But yeah, Amber, anything you might want to add to that?
I think that was really well said, and yeah, we're happy to have an initial conversation and then move forward and point you in the right direction as far as legal counsel or someone to work through those drafts. But we're happy to have a conversation to start out.
Yeah. Connie, could I add that at CPC, we do have a template for conservation easements if you're doing that. And it's very important that the land trust work closely with the landowner to not just align what our mission is, but also what the landowner's wishes are. So we go through it very carefully with them, but we still always suggest that they hire their own legal counsel to review that document. And then, of course, as Jenny said, that financially, we don't provide that financial background or information for the donative value of what they're going to get if they donate that conservation easement or even if they do a bargain sale. But I think almost every land trust has their own template because it has to meet certain requirements. And I'm sure Jeremiah will tell you that. He's probably represented a number of landowners, and he wants to make sure that they're protected as well as the land trust.
The only comment I would add to those responses, Jane, is recognize that the land trust, whatever nonprofit you are working with, is its own entity, right? And so they are going to have their own legal counsel that is going to review their documents to ensure that things are in compliance. If they need to, they're going to have their board of directors ensuring that that everything works to meet their bylaws and their mission and gift acceptance policies. And so at the end of the day, you know, it is incumbent upon the donor, whether it's land or of a financial gift, to ensure that they've got legal representation on their side. And most likely, if there's a really complex issue, you know, the land trust may say, you know what, it'd be best if our attorneys got together, right, and maybe tried to work out some of those really complex nuts and bolts. But generally speaking, the land trust will not be able, just based on their fiduciary obligations and position, to legally represent a donor.
Let's take one last question directed at Bethany. Patrick wanted to know how the costs compare for a conservational burial versus a traditional burial. Can you speak to that for just a second, Bethany?
Sure. Like anything in life, there's a wide range of costs in funeral and burial and cremation. So end of life services and disposition options, huge range in pricing, from $1,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But yes, typically green burial is more affordable. The plot purchase itself is typically more affordable. And also you're getting a larger plot. And then there's not all of those additional fees like the headstone, the concrete grave liner, the very expensive casket, the body preservation. All of those fees are gone when you choose green burial.
Okay. Well, we have reached 7:30, and those were really great questions. For further questions, there are there's the contact information in the chat if you want to take a screenshot of that quickly before we close. I know any of our speakers would be happy to hear from you, and I know that it's likely that you will continue to get questions that pop into your head after you've had time to assimilate and think through and attach this to your own situation and start to have these conversations. So go ahead and take a screenshot of that information or reach out to Connie or me if you didn't get it or wanted to reach out to any of them or be redirected to anyone. So we really appreciate everyone's participation tonight. And thank you so much for joining us, and watch all of our calendars for more informative educational activities coming up that we would love to see you there. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.